pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with justice for all.
Okay, first item on the agenda today, I asked Rossi Smith to come in to talk to us a little bit about the scallop program we already started, the oyster reseeding program, but more so, Cornell's in a position where they have an excess of scallop seeds that they need to disperse.
So yeah, I'm Kate Rossi-Smith. I've been here before. Back to the Bays Aquaculture Coordinator for the Cornell Cooperative Extension Marine Program. And if you wanted me to first speak on the...
Just a quick update on the...
We're in a holding pattern. We found out late in the game from the DEC that they in fact wanted us to amend our permit. So we're just waiting to get final approval so we could do like this big, nice public engagement seating event with our spat on shell.
Trying to affect what you've been doing?
No, they're happy. I was just cleaning the oysters today in the tank and they're growing and just gonna hold on to them. But I'm hoping to do it this month and hopefully involve some of the students, maybe in Mr. Williams' bio class.
How many have you actually moved from the spawning to the sanctuary? Just
the one, yeah, just the one time. I didn't do like a formal count.
No, you wanted to, yeah.
But I'll try to, again, if it's involving students and stuff, try to do an actual count to assess the success rate and have an idea of how many about.
When will you get a feel for if it works or not? End of the year or?
I mean, we're hoping to keep building upon this. I went out and kind of checked on the site and everything seems to be fine, but it's going to take some multiple rounds of to actually create like a reef. But
okay, good. That's not why you're really here.
So why I'm really here is, other than my Back to the Bays outreach stuff and advocating for this restoration work here on the island, I also work in the shellfish hatchery in Southold. And we have far exceeded our production goals for scallops. So that means, all the scallops that we would seed here in Shelter Island waters, Southold, Southampton, we way over went those numbers that we needed. So at this point, we have completely run out of gear. So normally they would go from the creek where we hold them when they're quite small to then we hand them off to the team that takes them out to bigger nets out close to Orient, and then they would get seeded. We filled all of those bigger nets. So they're kind of just again, holding and waiting, and everyone was wondering what we were going to do with them, because we're talking about like many thousands of scallops. And I said, I would love to be able to establish a scallop sanctuary, spawner sanctuary. Oh wait, I forgot to actually have a presentation. I don't have to do this then, all right? So the next slide is good.
That was great background.
So what is a scallop spawner sanctuary? Just basic information is it's a
I'll interrupt for a second. Coco, it's not showing up on our screens, so the audience, I don't believe, if someone on.
Oh, you have to hit play, maybe is it or that's the PDF version. I sent PowerPoint as well.
Well, it's not showing up on the screen, so the people in Zoom world will not be able to see that screen.
Right.
I got a different screen though. You have two screens.
Because I have two screens.
It's always colors.
Two different things, I mean.
There you go. Oh, it was a second ago.
Yeah, sorry.
There it
Time
is.
today. No, it's still not. It's showing up on our screen.
Hey, Amber.
Yeah, sorry about that. I just want everybody to be able to see it.
Right, none of us are in a rush.
Oh, screen two, that's what you need,
Screen two, yeah.
Yeah.
There we go.
Okay.
That's it.
So then down to the next page would be good. There we go. So a relatively small plot. Target density, seating density is typically 100 scallops per square meter. So 1 meter by 1 meter, or 3 feet. And just.
What are we talking, like 40 by 40?
Get there.
60.
That's general information.
Oh, I thought this was it. Oh, I'm sorry.
And so then
Okay.
the four corners are marked by buoys, just closed off, that one plot closed off from harvest. And then everything outside is still open. It's just, the bugs that are going to be seeded are truly bugs. They're small. They will not be harvest sized this fall and winter. So the idea is they're left to kind of just hang out in this one protected area. The dense seeding helps ensure that the eggs that they release in the spring and summer actually get fertilized. And then those that we seed this year will be of harvest size. And, they swim around, so I'm sure they'll exit. And the idea is that we'll see an increase in the scallop population. And I'm eyeing Cockles Harbor. So next page. So why start one on Shelter Island? Like I said, we have run out of space for storing them, and they're going to start dying. And we have put way too much sweat and tears and time into producing these scallops. It's really where my heart is. So I worked with the East Hampton Town Shellfish Hatchery for 6 years, and overlapping with that time, we had a Suffolk County grant for helping to bolster the scallop population. And so we established 2 scallop spawner sanctuaries, one in Nepean Harbor, one in 3 Mile Harbor. They were established in 2009. Each year we added more scallops. And after actually only 1 year, in 2010, those 2 harbors already started seeing an increase in the viable scallop harvest. And then, it was also based on scientific method developed by Steve Tuttleback, who's the scallop guy. And so we actually also, had spat collectors all throughout the harbors, and we assessed those, and statistical analysis showed that starting in 2011, the spat concentration in the harbors grew exponentially each year. Went from under 100 collected in our first year. We started, the baseline was 2008, to 2014, it was the many, many thousands collected. Just as an example, like this works.
Yeah.
So, and to this day, if anyone really knows where to get the scallops, those 2 harbors have remained, despite all these die-offs, where you can still get at least some. Next page. So, as to where, this is not exact. I just, after speaking to some baymen, half dozen baymen that I'm friends with, this general area was the first suggestion each one of them came up with independently. I drew that on the map just to show the scale. So what we're aiming for, we're estimating we have 40,000 scallops that I can put into Shelter Island waters. So following the 100 scallops per meter squared, we're looking at 400 meter square area, so 20 meters by 20 meters, or 60 feet by 60 feet. And so that is to scale that I drew on the map. So everyone was just kind of saying, like, there's the sandy flat off of that first causeway that typically scallops have done very well in. There's some eelgrass left around in that area. It's relatively protected from the northeast winds. That's one thing I don't want to see, is have them be too close to shore and have them just wash right up onto shore. That's heartbreaking. So yeah, this is not totally set. Like I said, this is based off of information I got from a number of baymen here on the island who suggested this, but I'm still, if anyone wants to reach out to me directly, please do. I don't want to put this, no matter how small, I don't want to interfere with anyone's harvest grounds. That would be counterintuitive. One Bayman texted me, Sawyer Clark texted me this morning saying if we had enough for 2 sanctuaries, that he would suggest that as well as inside of Taylor's Island off the rocks.
Yeah.
I'm not sure. We're like kind of, we won't really know until we start pulling them out of the nets. So yes.
So, Kate, would these areas be shut down for the future?
No, we'll well, it depends. If we want to keep adding, like we did in East Hampton,
You always add to the same spot?
always add to the same spot, then it would always just be that one plot that you could just go around. Like I said,
Yeah.
scallops swim, so. And we're not putting up walls, it's just corners. And the Bayman in East Hampton, they were super supportive of the program too. They saw immediately, a difference, and they were super respectful of the project.
Kate, is there any change to the scallops themselves? I mean, has there been any genetic,
You mean as far as like resiliency? No, we're not like genetically engineering scallops. That being said, each year we spawn scallops that have survived.
right,
So the idea is each year we develop a more tolerant,
right.
heat tolerant or stress tolerant scallop, generation of scallops. So
It's my understanding that the Peconic Bay Partnership, that they've taken scallops from the Chesapeake area,
oh yeah.
which the waters are naturally much warmer, not much warmer, but, I think 3 to 5, 6 degrees warmer. And are experimenting with them, moving them up here.
Yeah.
Since our waters are starting to warm. So they are in the midst of doing some experimentation, not only with seagrass, but also with scallops in terms of making them more tolerant to the actual conditions that they're finding here in the Northeast now.
Right. Yeah.
So that's a real positive.
Yeah, and that's the beauty of the science world is that
We
we're all-
know how far they move. You say that when they swim and they relocate. Are we talking about, does anybody know approximately how far that moves?
Well, I mean, they don't do like migrations. It's
Right.
just that.
Okay. General area.
Yeah, they
General
flop
area.
around and
Okay.
get away from crabs. They
Yeah,
go to
okay.
areas. Yeah. So yeah, just final notes that this is just a proposed site that I put up on the map after talking to some people. It is kind of nice that that spot is kind of next to where I'm creating my oyster reef. So it's nice little, not like trying to block off
like a
the bay.
little
I'm just
haven.
saying it's like a
Yeah.
little haven and there's just.
Synergy.
Yeah,
We did get a call from one of the Baymen, I guess maybe somebody you didn't speak with.
No, yeah.
I would like to just have a little time after this to hear from them. So like, what's your drop dead date that you need to get them in the water? Yesterday, I know.
Yeah, I know. That's why I was hoping to,
Yeah, I think we could expedite that, though. I think if you make a few phone calls, get the word out,
Yeah.
this is a Wednesday, there's no reason why
Are you comfortable giving us a list of who you spoke to?
sure.
Yeah,
Let's do that, I'll help.
yeah.
I've got an email set up ready to go to them.
Okay.
For those who are on email, the rest have to be hard copied,
Right.
which could take a little while.
Right. The idea is.
The leader, he's on email.
Right.
So the leader, the head, the guy, the
Leader of the
spokesperson
Yes.
is on email. So hopefully we could hear back. Does that mean we could do a special meeting?
Well, no, I think we just have to approve in theory. Do we have to do a resolution to accept these or?
I would say yes.
Yes,
Yeah.
okay.
I would say that we
Yeah, 'cause it's-
move forward with that, with the idea that we
License,
approve the approval of the majority of the
Right.
payment here.
Okay.
I think that would expedite it a little quicker.
Yeah, maybe the input of, yeah.
Yeah, getting the word out, I mean, to be honest, we always work that fine line a little bit with the Baymen because sometimes they are out of the loop and that's as much our fault as it is anybody's, that we don't reach, maybe communicate enough with them.
Yeah,
Maybe we should have a liaison, or they should have a liaison that periodically checks in with the
Absolutely.
supervisor. But rather than ruffle those feathers, and sometimes they come up with legitimate reasons why they are for something or against something. So to have them heard is a worthwhile effort, even if it costs us, a few days to do this,
okay.
We
Yep.
don't want them dying.
No,
So
but
we
but we also, I asked
Yeah, right.
for respect.
So the next work session, next Tuesday, we do a special meeting. for the resolution.
Does that work?
I don't know.
Today's,
No.
No, from yesterday.
Session is what I'm thinking.
Well, or, I mean, can we approve it based on confirmation that that location is appropriate to the Bayman?
Yes.
Right, and then if it isn't, we'll
We'll
go back to you.
get an alternate
Yeah,
location.
that's what I would like to
Maybe
do.
by
But I
But
approve
we'll
it.
do a resolution this evening.
Right, that's what I was thinking.
So we'll do it pending that, just give me 24 hours to contact as many people as I can,
Great,
okay?
yeah, yeah. I feel like I was gonna say one final note, but I don't. Oh, yeah, one final note that I realized this morning I forgot to put under my final note slide is, this doesn't affect, this is still separate, just like my oyster
Yeah.
creep stuff, still separate from what is going to be seeded
Right.
this fall. Like, so you
Right.
still get your.
that's clam seeding we do.
Oysters, clams, and
Yeah,
scallops,
yeah.
so this is just bonus.
Well, I think people, on behalf of the town board and the people, the residents of Shelter Island, you have to appreciate the efforts that you are
Oh, my
making
God.
here.
Yeah.
Because obviously it's cleaning a lot of water each and every day that they're out there and supporting the industry as well as keeping the water clean. So,
Thank you
hats
for
off to
saying
you
that.
and we really, really do appreciate your efforts.
Thank you, and I guess I can say one of the Bayman I did talk to, Skip, he obviously is very well respected, he said something to the same effect, he thanked me
Yes.
for the work
Right,
I was
yeah.
doing here.
Right.
Thank you.
That was everything, so, all right, thanks.
Totally.
Thank you.
Thanks, Kate.
Okay, next on the list, we have Nelson, Pope, and Voorhees here. They're the environmental and land use planners we contracted with. We have Kathy Eisman, who's going to make the presentation, I believe. This has to do with the input, the public input received and discussed regarding our housing. Kath?
Yes. Hi, everybody. I'm here with Taylor Garner, also from Nelson Pope Voorhees, just making sure you guys can hear me.
Yep.
Yes. Okay, great. I will share my screen and see how that works. Everybody can see that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, so we had met with the Community Housing Fund Advisory Board, the CHFAB, last week and presented the summary of public input that was received and provided some initial recommendations. The recommendations for the housing plan will ultimately come from the CHFAB. So we're still awaiting the final recommendations so we can prepare the plan and meet with you again next week. So today it's a compilation of the public input that we've received through the open houses and the survey. Initial analysis of demographic and housing trends related to the need for community housing and initial recommendations. And then finally, next steps. So there were two open houses, July 16th and August 6th, and participants were provided with a packet of materials and so they could provide written feedback. And there were several stations, 7 stations, 8, where there were poster boards of information and an opportunity to ask questions and feedback for several of those. The survey mimicked the questions from the open house, and that was open until August 21st. And there was also paper versions available at the town hall for those that wanted them, which were scanned and sent to us for inputting. And it was advertised on the town website, the CHFAB website, social media, flyers, newspapers, and signs. So again, the survey was comprised of the same information as was asked at the open house. So that way we could compare apples and apples. They were all summarized into one data set. We did ask for a name and address to ensure that there would be one submission per respondent. And those survey results that we pulled all them together into one huge spreadsheet have been published on the CHFAB website. We did omit people's names, addresses, and email addresses from the PDF that is on the CHFAB website. This input from the community helps to inform the recommendations of the housing plan, and it also helps the Community Housing Board to focus their efforts. There were 159 respondents in total, that completed the survey or the open house submission. And here's the breakdown. Most were interested citizens, some were individuals seeking housing, and you were only allowed to submit one response for this question. So it could have been an interested citizen seeking housing. That is in that category at the bottom. One of the things that we just wanted to summarize right off the bat is that, there were a lot of written comments that were expressed, and we wanted to make sure that those comments are out there for everyone to understand. There were a lot of comments about the concern or lack of understanding about Transfer Development Rights Program, TDRs. And as you know, the TDR is working with a TDR expert, and that they actually will be presenting right after this, is my understanding. So the use of TDR specifically is not an aspect of the housing plan. This is not something that will be recommended or not recommended. It's just not part of the housing plan. The second and somewhat related concerns that we heard were about protection of the natural resources, groundwater, drinking water, impact of wastewater on Shelter Island of development. And one comment here is that any development will have to conform to Suffolk County Sanitary Code and be protective of natural resources and groundwater. And also any development would need to conform to town code. So the last thing that we heard from some of the respondents was that there would be a lack of transparency in future decisions, or just to make sure that there was transparency in future decisions. And just the overall concern about the town as a developer or landlord and the stress that could have, or other possible concerns related to that aspect of the town board or the town advisory board's involvement. So there are recommendations that will be included in the plan for a transparent process with the public hearing requirements. And then other options for administration of the program, or other options in general. So through another agency specializing in housing management, or other means. The main takeaways from the community input: more than half of the respondents, 56%, know someone who moved off Shelter Island specifically because of housing costs. And most people, 70%, know someone who commutes to Shelter Island who works full-time year-round on the island. These professions that are specifically mentioned are teachers, recreation center staff, caregivers for senior residents, landscapers, cleaners, library personnel, staff of the local paper, ferry employees, supermarket employees, mechanics, police, marine workers, painters, electricians, plumbers, roofers, home improvement, and bank tellers. As far as who people know who is in the most need of community housing, 64.9% said the younger population, 60% said families, and 28.4% said seniors. So clearly you can answer more than one response on this. We also heard, although it's not a specific population, volunteers was one of the things that was written a number of times. This slide shows the percent of responses indicating a good fit for community housing funds use in the town. And you can see that the ones where it's more than 50%, housing, counseling services, first-time home buyer assistance programs, rehabilitation of existing buildings to be used for community housing had the highest response as a good fit. And then construction of housing for rent at 59%, just as compared to construction of housing for sale at 42%, just so you can see that there was definitely more support for rented units than for sale units. And then soft costs planning and so forth, associated with community housing, 73%, and then purchase of land, 70. This is the percent of respondents that agree or strongly agree that community housing should include this type of housing. So senior communities, 59%, apartments over stores came up a lot. Obviously, this is not something that's going to happen a lot. And we did get input on that from the CHFAB that this is not, there are not a lot of areas where there are stores or offices where you could have apartments, but there may be some potential for infill in some locations. Manor house apartments, 55%, to family homes, 61%. And you can see 63% for both accessory dwelling units and cottage communities. And then single family homes at 61%. I wanted to show also of all of these categories, housing type preferences, because either people agreed, strongly agreed, or were neutral, or they disagreed or strongly disagreed. So I thought it was important to show where there was either support or people, could go either way. So we did want to point that out. So, 75% for Manor House versus 25 disagreeing. Senior communities, we have 80% versus 20% strongly disagreeing or disagreeing, and so forth. Same thing here, 80% were either in agreement, strongly agreed, or neutral about accessory dwelling units. So it's pretty consistent. There are, and then I just, because these tie into the recommendations. Okay, so I am turning it over to Taylor Garner now. She's working on the needs analysis and can speak to these slides.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having us. So the purpose of this needs assessment is to compile a data-based foundation in the creation of community housing. And it's always challenging to put an exact number on the number of housing units that are needed in a community. That's for a few different reasons. One of those reasons is the people who had a need for community housing or housing for these income levels may have already left the island, as we saw from our survey results. And those people that have already left, there's really no way to get a count on how many of them there are and how many units would have supported their need. A lot of times in needs analysis, when you see an exact number of housing units, that's based on like a registry of residents that have signed up to apply for such units. The most recent comprehensive plan notes that the Shelter Island housing list is fairly short. Not too many people have signed up, which they believe might be a result of people just knowing that there's not much inventory available anyway. That plan does note, though, that they think somewhere in the range of 20 to 40 affordable housing units would help serve the need. So part of this needs assessment is an analysis of demographic, housing, and income trends. And we just wanted to give a little preview of that and what we found. Most of these results probably won't be very surprising, but it is important to have the data to back everything up. So this first one here is about age over time. So we're comparing the years 2000, 2010, and 2020. All of the data is from the Census Bureau, either from the decennial census or the American Community Survey 5-year estimates. And these are specifically for the Shelter Island and Shelter Island Heights CDPs. So as you can see here, we have the 2000 census in green, 2010 census in blue, and 2020 in yellow. The biggest changes that we've seen over this time period are in your under 20 age group. You can see that population has declined from about 20% of the population down to an estimated 8% of the population. And then on the other side, we've seen an increase in the over 60 population. going from, in the 30s to over 45%. There's been a slight decline in the 35 to 60 age range, but nothing too significant. And finally, you'll see a little bit of an increase in the 20 to 34 age range. But when we looked into this data even further, we saw that the increase was really only in the 20 to 24 population, while the 25 to 34 population had declined. Next, we want to show a little bit about housing tenure. So the chart at the top shows the same years, 2000, 2010, and 2020, and the percentage of the housing units that are in each category. As you can see, there hasn't been much change in the trends. So year-round owner-occupied units are in the 30% range, year-round renter-occupied, below 10% and actually declining as of the most recent estimates. And seasonal homes have stayed fairly consistent over 50% of the housing stock. This last category, other, that's mostly made up of other types of vacant homes or homes for sale or homes in the process of transferring ownership. And then the graph below just shows the 2020 breakdown in more detail so we can visualize it better. Next, we are looking at housing costs as a percentage of income. We're comparing owners to renters. So owners are in blue, renters are in orange. And the metric we're using here is looking at who is spending more than 30% of their income on housing. So that's a typical planning standard for housing being affordable or the homeowner or renter being cost burdened in their housing costs. So in 2000, it's fairly even. We have around 20% of households spending more than 30% of their income on housing. By 2010, you start to see this gap emerge where we have 70% of renters spending more than 30% of their income on housing compared to 38% of homeowners spending that same amount. And then the latest 2020 estimates show that gap widening even further, where 100% of renters are spending more than 30% of their income on housing costs compared to 13% of homeowners spending that much on housing. And then finally, median household income over time. So you'll see for the 2000 and 2010 numbers, it's broken down into the two different CDPs because that's how the data was available. Whereas for 2020, we were able to get a combined estimate for both CDPs together. Even with that, the trends are pretty clear of how it's been increasing quite significantly over time these past 20 years. There's a few different reasons for that. It could be partially related to wealthier residents moving into the community, as well as residents who are below the median income and struggling to find housing, maybe moving out, and their incomes are dropping out of the analysis.
Thank you, Taylor. This next part is the summary of the initial recommendations for the housing plan that have come out of the public input that we received. The initial recommendations are for housing types to include apartments over stores. And again, this is limited potential, but where the potential does exist, that might be an opportunity. Accessory dwelling units, and those are also rentals, as well as senior developments, cottage communities, and manor houses. And those are, as far as the for sale or for rent model, the support is for rental. As far as location goes, there is public support for community housing distributed throughout the town. But we also, this wasn't one of the questions, but in the comments in this question and in other places, there was a desire for housing, community housing, to be in locations where there is infrastructure or shopping or community services nearby. As far as the fund goes, the construction for housing for rent is one of the priorities. The use of funds to support accessory dwelling units, which are actually under town code called accessory apartments, in a number of ways, possibly through counseling services, planning and design services to support additional accessory dwelling units and other costs, and also for conversion of accessory structures into ADUs. Other fund uses that are supported are for the purchase of land, funds for rehabilitation of existing buildings for rent, where those come up, and then planning, engineering, design costs related to community housing, as well as housing counseling services. As far as implementation recommendations, management is one of the items as far as how the town would actually organize such efforts, whether it's through a housing partnership or possibly creating a community land trust. And we're going to provide a couple of examples of those in the plan. It's recommended that the town either use their existing JFAB or the Housing Advisory Board to recommend projects, and Planning Board would also be part of that when there's a recommendation for change of zone to the overlay district. And those recommendations would go to the town board. We would recommend a public hearing in most cases. Maybe there may be, counseling services and so forth that are established as part of the recommendations that aren't necessarily part of a public hearing process, but any redevelopment certainly would be required to have a public hearing. And that there be clear standards to ensure that the community housing units remain affordable in perpetuity, as well as all revenues received by the town through rental or repayment of loans or so forth be deposited back into the fund. There is a recommendation as part of the requirement of the Peconic Bay Community Housing Fund Act that every 5 years the town would update this housing plan, and this would be an opportunity to make changes based on lessons learned through the 5 years that have gotten past, and actually taking a look at how the funds had been expended previously and how well it's working, as well as changes in program management and possibly looking in a different direction. And then lastly, legislative actions, town code amendments. These are the initial recommendations. These are projects that have been vetted, or they're being looked at by the Community Housing Board, and they are consistent with the recommendations if these would be developed and available for rent for eligible individuals. More details about those. And then as far as accessory apartments, we believe that there is a need to look at potential modifications to the administrative code related to short-term rentals of ADUs, and possibly limiting that, as well as looking at whether there is an impact of having year-round accessory apartments in the nearshore area where the code only allows transient rentals at this point. So that might be a way to open up additional accessory apartments year-round. And then we will see, we'll hear from the community, the CHPOB later this week. We did hear some initial input on last week, and related to, making sure that sustainability elements are part of the design. And there were some other creative ideas that we will be incorporating, and we'll see you next week. So for the timeline, as I said, the CHPOB is actually, they're using the Community Housing Board meeting tomorrow night, yes, to discuss initial recommendations and to provide us at Nelson Pope Quarries the recommendations to funnel into the plan on Friday. So we will be coming back to you next Thursday with the components, the outline, the components of the draft plan, as well as the initial discussion, initial recommendations for discussion. And then based on what we hear and what you say, we will be working on the final draft plan that will be available on the 23rd of September. And that would be circulated then to the Suffolk County Planning Commission. The following week, a public hearing would be scheduled, and the public hearing would actually be on October 11th. So with that, just before I conclude, because I just wanted to have a discussion with you all, as you know, I wanted to address some of the negative attention that MPV has received in the press. And give a little bit of an explanation, because I'm afraid that the residents of Shelter Island will be concerned. You might have seen the articles in the paper and the letters to the editor for the Southampton Press related to some regrettable language that was included in a contract that Nelson Pope and Voorhees had with the town of Southampton. And that was regarding approach to community outreach. That language was a sub-consultant of ours that we've worked with previously, and unfortunately, it wasn't vetted before it ended up in the contract. And so that's very unfortunate and very, it's very contrary to where we are, who we are as a firm. I know I've been with this firm since the beginning and a partner since 2005. And that is not who we are. We are very, we listen, we engage with the public, and we have our policy is to have a very transparent process. So anyway, I just wanted that out there, that we're not, we're very sorry that happened. And we're going to work to regain the trust of our clients. So anyway, with that, I thank you for having us aboard to work with the town. And I look forward to seeing you next week.
So Kat, just so everybody understands, this is pretty much the presentation you made to the CHFAB board. They're going to give you some feedback tomorrow night, and then next week we'll get the next phase of this with the feedback.
That's correct. Yes.
And just for clarification, that's on Tuesday, the
Yes.
13th, not
Correct.
the 15th, Thursday, the 15th.
Right.
Correct. Yes.
Kathy, I have, so I want to just zero in a little bit on the design aspect. Those design pictorials that we had at the two meetings, those are really like crash test dummies. They have that sort of relationship to what's eventually going to happen, same like crash test dummies to humans, meaning that, this is sort of, it won't have a flat roof and it won't be brick, that kind of thing. It'll be clappered and it'll have a pitched roof. That being said, in the plan itself, how specific are these plans usually, from what I've read, not too, but I just want to get your take. How specific are these plans usually when it comes to design parameters that eventually will be followed?
You are correct. They are not specific, but the plan can include goals for, looking at the context and making sure that whatever is developed in, in respectful of its neighbors. And also they, one of the items that came up with the CHFAB last week was the desire to, to build in a sustainable fashion. So possibly using, reusing buildings that are being demolished elsewhere on the island, actually, reusing. So you can have recommendations to follow in the future. And one of the things, also that might come into it is a low impact design where you are very respectful of the water usage and make sure that there's not a need for irrigation. And also that helps with the maintenance in the future. So you can have those kind of recommendations in the plan for sure to guide whoever is going to be implementing the plan.
Okay, terrific, thank you.
Anybody else?
I have a quick question. As far as the needs analysis, you referenced that the only way you can really get a hard number is if the town had a registry and you cull off that to see what the needs are, right? Because unbeknownst to me, we do have a community housing registry. Do we have any idea how many we have on that current registry?
No.
And
That
that should be incorporated and then.
up a year ago, and people said, we didn't know about it, we'll start, and I thought there was 100 names on it.
Okay, because what I would suggest, maybe, if we do a 30-day period, really publicize this and say, hey, people who are living on the island, people who have children who want to come back to the island, please fill out the community housing registry form, which is online. And then we can get it'll be a little litmus test, see if we can, try to cobble together a more concrete number of the need. I know it's after the summer and it's not going to be totally accurate, but I think if we put it out on our social media, maybe take an ad out in the paper, and just really, call to people to fill this out if you need it. So then we'd have some, specific information. I think that would be helpful.
Yeah. I think the greatest reason why and justification why the registry has been a dismal failure is there's been no movement on the part of the town to do anything about this for decades. So people that came
Doesn't
to,
exist.
people that came to the initial meetings all basically said the same thing. Why fill it out? You haven't done anything. If you show me that you're prepared to do something, I'm definitely interested. But that big meeting that we had here months and months ago when we packed this room, that was a familiar saying from the public was they just didn't have enough faith in the registry. So that town board is serious about this issue. The town attorney's idea is a good one, and I think we should support that because obviously when you build up the registry, you justify the need to move forward with this initiative.
Yeah, then have empirical data to support.
Okay. All right, Kathy and Taylor, thank you very much.
Thank you.
We will see you next week.
Hey, thank you very much. Bye, everybody.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, next on the agenda, we have EW Grosser Consultants. Again, this is a consulting firm we hired to get us going with the TDR process. You have Kim Gennaro and Brian Grogan here. Walk us through their findings.
Sure, good afternoon. I can share my screen and pull up a presentation and we can kind of walk through. All right. Can everybody see that?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. So Peter Grosser's been retained for about 2 weeks now or so. And we had an initial meeting with the Suffolk County Health Department, which included members of their wastewater management office, as well as Peter Scully, Deputy County Executive from the County Exec's office, to kind of discuss the beginning points of a TDR program. So again, the transfer development rights is kind of, I'll say basic. It's broken down into two pieces. There are sending districts, which is where you're taking rights from, and receiving districts, which is where you're going to be landing the development rights on. So the potential sending districts would be parcels that were acquired via the town's CPF funds, of which I think there were a number of properties that we had shown or were given. Some of the initial potential receiving areas in development with the housing program were kind of in the center of the island along the 114 corridor. Were some initial thoughts as to where the housing may land. And at this program that would be developed for Shelter Island would be limited solely to for community housing purposes. So you couldn't use the TDRs for increasing, say, seats in a restaurant or something along those lines. It was limited primarily to community housing. So as we spoke to the county with respect to what the requirements were, obviously, sanitary systems and wells and all that kind of fun stuff or the water supply need to meet county standards. With that, one of the biggest items that the county has, and for very important reasons with respect to water quality and environmental preservation, is for a TDR program to be implemented, you need public water. And what the county means by public water is largely a municipal style water supply. So one that is owned and operated by a municipality, not so much a definition defined by New York State, which might include community and non-community water supply systems, which there are plenty of on the island. And it's not a private well, which there are also on the island. So that's the biggest one. Obviously here, we're all within the same school district. It's all within the same groundwater management zone. Largely anything that we'd be doing would likely meet the local zoning codes or have the overlay district for that. And we would need to prepare a generic environmental impact statement, kind of going over what are the impacts of the TDR program. So with that being said, here's where, I'll say our conversation with the county, took a little bit of a turn, which again, related to the public water part of it. The county did not want to really, discuss, options of doing a TDR program absent of public water. So as we know, we have, 3 main water districts, that there's, Deering Harbor, West Neck, and Shelter and the Heights. And those water districts are not really so much in the areas where the initial thought was as to where this housing would be located. So really, without having either a town-wide or another water district that would have to be developed, a TDR program really isn't going to be of much use because it would really be limited to those 3 areas. And those 3 areas are, fairly well built out already. And we're not necessarily in line with what the board here was looking to maybe try to locate these community housing areas in. So therefore, we're recommending basically that, this maybe get tabled to a little bit of a later date until maybe we could figure out how a water district would come into play in order to, I'll say, justify a wider spread use of TDRs as a means to achieve this community housing. Because like I said, without it, I don't really think it's much of a starter on the eyes of the health department. Because they're ultimately the agency that needs to review and approve the TDR program. So that, again, trying to do that with just using private wells or New York State compliant community or non-community water supply sources is probably not going to be feasible. So that's basically all that I think we had. Kind of that's the basic of where we are right now. I don't know if the board members themselves have any questions for us.
So Brian, I just so the public understands, just to make it very clear, excuse me, guys, just to make it very clear, as of right now, transfer of development rights are off the table.
Correct. Yeah, it would, if you were to do it, it would have very limited impact, and I think it's best to take it off the table at this point in time.
Brian, I have a question. Just to make sure that this is answered firmly. If we were to do the small community systems have been mentioned throughout our discussions here about community housing, sort of 5, 6, 7, 8 units on a well, and that well being run like a public water system. Now, I understand that that's a non-starter here, but if such a thing was proposed but it was run by, say, Suffolk County Water. Is that doable?
That may be doable.
I don't think Suffolk County would want to do that.
I don't think so.
Yeah.
I don't know.
It's not
Get
worth
it out there as a question, no.
Again, we kind of went through that discussion with the county on saying that if the town were to own it, because it is the town's housing, would that really work? It was a very difficult question for them to answer right off the bat without having all the extra details. You need redundancy in terms of wells, possibly treatment. You need licensed operators. So it becomes a financial obligation for the town to run it for that small of a development, in which case it may, from a financial standpoint, counterintuitive though, go bigger because you have the same requirements. So you have the same redundancy requirements, you have the same operator requirements, but now you're serving a larger area rather than just one small, 5 or 6 unit development. I think that's because then you run into issues of finding good water quality. Can it fit on the property? Are we putting it on another property somewhere else? That it opens up a little bit of a can of worms. It's possible, but I really think it's better suited, and the county was really pushing for a more robust water district system.
Can I just have a follow-up question? So the long and short of it is no public water, no local TDR program, but also no public water, no TDRs at all, right? So we couldn't even qualify for a variance from the sanitation code with the county, or what's known as a TDR from the county, right?
Correct. Basically, yeah. If you were to attempt to apply on an individual basis for a lot with absent of public water, the county would not, that doesn't meet their criteria for a transfer of development rights. Now, again, could you attempt an individual variance? Yes. But I mean, we were told by the county that doesn't like to give odds that the odds were less than 50%. And, by that, I think that's a substantial, realization that that's probably not going to be a variance they're going to give.
And Brian, just to put it out there, there was a recent variance with the health department for a transfer of development rights for a local restaurant. But that local restaurant is in a water district. It's in the West Neck Water District. So that's why that was allowed.
Yep.
Yeah,
the county.
Again, that would be, if it was in, again, that's why I'm saying, if you had, a development or a TDR right now that was in the Heights, within West Neck, within Deering Harbor, those would all be considered public water under the eyes of the county, and therefore that would meet the criteria there. Anywhere else, absent of those, 3 areas, it's not likely to be considered.
Mhm.
And
Okay.
again, the county's standpoint on that is, ensuring adequate water quality for the people in those areas.
Right. And just to reiterate what Stephen's been telling us all along is, TDRs are not necessary. They're not necessary for housing. They're an added tool, but now we're one tool short. Housing.
Yeah, because you still have the floating zone.
Right.
Which is one tool in the toolbox. And then also, if you need increased density on a lot, you can technically go for an area variance. So you still have avenues to get a little more density on lots.
Mm-hmm.
A little more.
And we can,
But actually, no, you're still forestalled with the septic.
right.
Yeah.
So like as far as zoning density, we have that available. Septic density, we don't. So, yeah.
So it's
Okay.
2 units.
So I guess for now, we're done with Grocer on this issue.
Yes.
Right.
I think we'll be in touch with them about some further needs of the town.
Yeah, no, thank you very much. You did a great job here.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
No problem. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Kim, thank you too.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah.
Okay, next on the list, we really haven't.
That needs to move to executive session, if I might say.
Okay.
Okay.
And why is that?
Why is that? Because we are going to be discussing personnel issues. Okay.
Perfect. Because we need to give a reason.
All right, all
There
right.
you go.
Sure.
Okay, that's it on the agenda. Or on the table, Meg.
I don't think I have anything. It was a holiday weekend. That's not good.
You would like to think that Jim didn't have it. Albert, that's not going to happen, you know that.
Jim, I'm looking at the clock, okay?
All right, on a serious note,
Are we all?
our thoughts and prayers go out to the Petrie family on the death of Mr. Petrie. So a longstanding resident here on Shelter Island that has been a godsend to so many of us and has run so many fine functions at the Pridwin. So our thoughts and prayers are with the family. I'd like to thank everybody from the Vigil of Hope. We probably attracted around 90 to 100 people last Wednesday. I can't say enough great things about Emily Krause, who was a great speaker who started the night off. And I want to thank Pastor Steve Atkinson from the Presbyterian Church for his kind words and moment of silence, and Marty Clark for speaking up, and Danielle and Steve Sachs and Drew Harvey. And finally, Frida Krause, who kind of culminated the evening with her fine message, and the beautiful singing of Julia King. And thank you to Becky Smith, florist in White Oak and Farm and Gardens, Kelly Serreris and Jackie Carnivogel of Hugs, Steve, our sound man, and the kids from the National Honor Society. We thank you very much. We'd also like to thank the library for helping us, and along with the superintendent of schools, Dr. Dolja, our supervisor, Mr. Siller, council, and the support of the town board, and everybody else that was involved with that. It was a wonderful evening. People asked me if we're going to make this an annual event, and I would like to think that we are. I think one day a year it is important to sit down and to and talk about these tough issues. And I think the speakers, the 5 of them, got up there and spoke beautifully. And it was very difficult for some of them to speak very personal, on a personal level. So thank you very, very much. I'll give my 2 town reports. We met this morning, Deer and Tick met this morning. I distributed copies to everybody. Chairman reminded us about completing the harassment discrimination policy training, which and notify Kim when we're finished. Bow Payne report. We are in the midst of starting our hunting season. We do have a 9-day, 10-day period from September 10th through September 18th to comply with New York State guidelines, where we allow private hunters to hunt on private properties only for antlerless deer. Bo informed us that the cooler has been turned on at Cobbetts and it's up and running. We are not going on any town properties prior to October 1st. October 1st marks the official beginning of bow and arrow season, and that runs through the months of October, November, December, January, followed by 2 months of nuisance season. Number 3, on September 8th, which is tomorrow night, at 7:00 here at Town Hall, we have our annual hunters meeting, which we haven't unfortunately had for the last 3 years because of COVID. I'd like to notify all the hunters that we encourage you to be down here. Our goal is to listen to your concerns and issues, share information with the flyover data with you. And we also obviously want to constantly remind ourselves and local hunters of their efforts to help in the recreational hunting season. They do a great job, and they do it for nothing. They do it for sport, but it has helped us attain our goals. The fourth poster program, they asked a question about New York DEC. Have they been reviewing the current policies regarding the use of 4 posters throughout New York State, specifically here on the east end of Long Island? Bo is going to look into that. He does not have any knowledge of such a review, but we'll be looking into that in the coming weeks. As far as the budget of 2023, we will closely resemble what we submitted to the supervisor in 2022. It will be finalized by Chief Reed that a deer and tick budget is under his domain. The tick project report, the current study, which has been conducted in Dutchess County here in New York, is done by Dr. Richard Osfeld, who targets ticks on small rodents. There have been some very limited successes, but no major changes in the incidence of tick-borne illness. The initial study began back in 2017. Homeowners have deployed sprays and bait boxes in their backyards to kill ticks. Sprays are native, naturally occurring in funguses that makes its living on feeding on ticks. These sprays are completely safe for both pets and humans. They target the white-footed mouse, chipmunks, and shrews, and the small boxes of bait. Further discussion went on about vaccinations. The vaccination program is moving forward. Bo informed us that clinical trials are now in their third year and are focusing strictly on Lyme disease. More study is still required, but Dr. Campbell believes that there is a possibility that a vaccine may become available potentially by 2024. Vaccine will not protect you from other tick-borne illnesses other than Lyme disease. The Green Expo was held, a week and a half ago, attended by Julia and our chairman, Jim Bevilacqua. They represented the committee. They accepted a lot of questions. The most frequently asked questions at the expo were about sprays and repellents. That was the number one thing asked. So taking that in consideration, what is safe to use on your skin? What is safe to use on clothing? Obviously, self-awareness and self-protection are the best means of preventing tick-borne illnesses. We plan on writing some articles in the paper come next April, May, in that time frame about that very thing to educate the public about individual responsibility of what they can do to protect their families from tick-borne illness. The educational subcommittee report was by Julia Weissenberg. Julia reinforced some of the observations made at the Green Expo. There's a new educational articles from both the Shelter Island Reporter and Gazette that we were targeting, as I just mentioned. She would also like to target social media as well. She does have a library presentation next week on September 14th at 6 p.m. It's a panel discussion that includes hunters, Doug Sherrod, Jackie Arthur, Bo Payne, and Julia herself. This is an effort to help address many of the issues that the Deer and Tick Committee face. It also is designed to hopefully recruit new people for our archery program, which is a goal of the committees, which we haven't had in the past, to increase the number of young bow hunters in order to maintain a good number of recreational hunters here on Shelter Island and to stabilize the hunting numbers. Julia has been coordinating her efforts through the town's recreation department and with both Dr. Dolger and Supervisor Siller. The goal is to find approximately $3,500, of which we have about $1,500 remaining in our educational budget. Therefore, we are short about $2,000 to make this effort happen. There's a lot of interest in this program, which involves a 7.5-hour training program instructed by Abby Butler. The monies that go to support this buy 10 bows, 8, I think, for right-handed shooters and 2 for left-handed shooters, arrows, targets, protective net, which is required for the program. Committee voted 4-0 to support that initiative. So we'll be moving forward on that. I'd like to take a breather and get a little bit of water and pass the baton. I'll come back to the capital planning.
Amber?
I don't have much.
Hurry up. We should close the meeting.
The FAB, meeting from last week has already been discussed. It was the same presentation that we just saw, basically. Jim, and they're going to have that meeting tomorrow at 7:30. It's a Zoom-only meeting because at 6 o'clock, we've got WQI, and at 7, we've got the deer meeting, and then, the hunters meeting, and then 7:30. So just get that out there for people who want to.
Zoom only.
Zoom only, yes. And then Jim did mention the harassment and discrimination. And so we, as board members, as liaisons to our committees, need to make sure, like this morning, I happened to be just in the room at the Deer and Tick meeting and overheard Dr. Bevilacqua say, everybody on the committee needed to complete their training. We need to also be making sure that each of our committee chairs are relaying that information. So that's just a note for ourselves to make sure everybody does the training. And that's all that I have. Have enough time?
No, go to BJ.
I don't have anything.
All right. Very quickly, capital planning meeting met. I will go over Brian's discussion because I think there's some interesting things there that we did not share at the meeting, but I'll give you all an update on road pavings that were done in the last few weeks. I'm happy to announce that Petticoat Lane, east of Brandon Parkway, which is a long strip of road that was in bad shape, and Silver Beach was done. Peconic Avenue and White Birch on the corner, that part that was in dismal shape, has been raised and repaved. Smith Street, if you traveled down there lately, east of School Street out to 114. South Ferry Hills has all been completed, so there are quite a few roads down there. Bowditch Road by the Highway Department, the skate park, that small patch was done. And Goat Hill, we actually did a cart path that's up there. We've been constantly working on improving the golf course, and that was our effort. In the coming weeks, we do plan on getting out to Dino Rock Road. We also want to do a small part of Midway from Bowditch down to Jasper. We're also looking at road raising at Bram Island Road near Cobbetts. Again, Brian does a great job on that. We work off the Cornell program. Our roads are all rated, and we try. I think our roads overall on the island we've done a great job in terms of maintaining roads. In terms of the Shelter Island Community Center across the street, we have received the quote from the new vendor for the front door, which meets our needs and will be installed shortly. The roof overhang might have to be done in-house, Jerry. So the estimates that we're getting are way above what we budgeted for. So we just did some work here over on the assessors building on some repairs because of leaks in that building. We did that in-house.
No, we jobbed that.
Oh, we dropped that out. Okay, you're right. You're absolutely right. I'm seeing the trucks there. We may have to do that for across the street. Front steps, Bruce Kaplan is just waiting for the overhang. We're trying to do the roof first and then get the steps done. The ADA compliant ramp will be done definitely in-house. That will be the last thing that's done. Brian's also working on new signs for the front lawn and for the parking lot side for the Legion. The recycling centers, if you've been down the recycling center, the gutters have all been installed. We're looking, and the Green Options Committee is looking into solar panels for either the roof or an alternate site there. Brian spoke with a vendor at the Expo Fair that was very interested in initiating this thing at the recycling center. Crescent Beach Bathroom Pavilion, the expected date for delivery is in October of 2022, which is obviously at the very end of our season. But that's when, with COVID, that was a problem. That project had just been pushed back. But it'll be a very similar structure to what we have at Wade's Beach. The new bathroom trailer will be removed after the 5K race. All right, so I think that's in the third week in October. Need pump out every 2 weeks or less. We averaged about 11 to 14 days on the pump out. I will point out, ladies, that the women's bathroom and the handicap bathroom filled up much quicker than the men's bathroom. And there may be a reason for that, but that was a reality. We did have to pump out for the season about 8, and we may have to go one more to 9 at a cost of $700 per pump out, which will mean about $6,000 total or so. We're going to be in that vicinity on pumping out that bathroom. The good news is none of that stuff is going into the bay. That's the positive. On the Dock Creek, again, we continue to work on that with DEC permitting. Taylor's Island, we had a leak out there in a water main last weekend, which right on Labor Day weekend, between the old and the new bulkhead near the dock, right near the dock area, we were leaking water all out there. And we went out there, Brian sent the crew out there and repaired it immediately. I will call our attention to the town board that there's a line that comes from the mainland there out to Taylor's Island. That's a small plastic pipe that's old. So the fact that's the one that broke. It might have been disturbed when we put in the new bulkheading there, but it's something that we got to look at. I don't know how many years old that thing is, but it's something we might have to take a serious look at. What I'll do, I'll save the other report, or you want to save it for no?
Yeah, save it.
I'll save that. The main report for the grant seating that we had yesterday, it's a fairly extensive report. I'll save that for next week. Of course, I don't have much coming up this week. All right, thank you.
Good, thank you, Jim. Okay, Stephen, you have anything?
No, Miss.
Adi, anything from your office? Nope, you're good? Okay. Julia, any questions?
I'm fine, thank you.
Okay, I'll open up to the public. Anybody in the audience want to say anything? Anybody on Zoom want to say anything? Okay, we do have a town board meeting at 6 PM tonight. Okay, make a motion, we go into executive session.
So move.
All those in favor?